Part 1. The Hook. The marriage. The night air was heavy, the kind that presses against your chest and lingers long after the sun has set. In the corner of a Walmart parking lot, a lone pickup truck sat idling beneath a flickering street lamp. Inside was Michael Thompson, a man whose face was drained of all color, his hands trembling as they gripped the steering wheel. The light above illuminated the stains smeared across his fingers and forearms, blood drying in thick streaks. When the officer tapped on the glass, Michael rolled down the window. His voice carried no panic, no urgency, only a strange, unnerving calm. "I just killed my wife and her lover." It was the kind of statement that freezes time, that rips away the ordinary mask of suburbia and exposes the horror lurking beneath. For police, it was the beginning of an investigation. For Michael, it was the end of a life he thought he knew. To outsiders, Michael and Sarah Thompson were the picture of stability. They had been married nearly 20 years, raising 2 children in a modest home with a neatly trimmed lawn. Their lives revolved around school events, Sunday church services, and quiet evenings that blended into the humdrum rhythm of small-town living. Family photos lined the walls, their smiles broad and effortless, radiating the illusion of permanence. But perfection often hides fractures. For Michael, those cracks began as whispers in the back of his mind. Subtle shifts in Sarah's behavior that didn't align with the woman he once knew. She worked later than usual, often claiming deadlines or last-minute projects. Her laughter, once familiar and shared, now belonged to conversations he wasn't part of. Her phone, always close, always turned just slightly away, became a barrier, guarding secrets she refused to explain. Michael's questions were met with reassurances, but they never felt convincing. The pit in his stomach grew heavier. A husband's intuition, that primal sense of distance and betrayal, told him something was slipping beyond his grasp. What started as doubt soon grew into certainty. Sarah was hiding something, and it was tearing their marriage apart from the inside. Part 2. The suspicion. Michael's unease sharpened with time. What began as vague doubt evolved into gnawing suspicion that consumed his every waking thought. He noticed the little things, unexplained receipts tucked into Sarah's purse, hurriedly deleted messages on her phone, hushed calls that ended abruptly the moment he walked into the room. He told himself he was imagining it, that maybe the years of routine had left him paranoid. But deep down, he knew the truth. Love that once felt warm and unshakable now seemed distant, slipping away like sand through his fingers. At night, while Sarah slept beside him, Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In the silence, his mind replayed every moment that didn't add up, every excuse that rang hollow. He began checking her phone records, scrutinizing her comings and goings. Each discovery fueled his anger. Friends noticed the change in him, his patience worn thin, his humor extinguished. He kept a journal, scribbling bitter lines about betrayal, invisibility, and a sinking feeling that his marriage was collapsing. The evidence mounted until one evening, Michael could no longer sit in the shadows of doubt. He followed her. Part 3. The discovery. It was a cold Thursday when Michael trailed Sarah's car across town. He stayed several lengths back, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. She drove with purpose, not toward the grocery store as she had claimed, but toward a quiet residential neighborhood he didn't recognize. Her car stopped in front of a modest home. Michael parked down the street, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness before Sarah emerged, knocking lightly on the door. David Miller, her coworker, greeted her. Michael saw it through the window, the smile, the warmth, the familiarity. Then the embrace. In that instant, Michael's worst fears solidified into a brutal reality. The woman he had built a life with, the mother of his children, was entangled with another man. The betrayal seared through him like fire, blinding him to reason. He stepped from his truck, fists clenched, the world narrowing into a tunnel of rage. With each stride toward the house, his vision blurred, his thoughts drowned by fury. He burst through the door, armed with a box cutter he had carried with him. The confrontation was swift and merciless. Shouts turned to chaos. Rage guided his hand as the blades slashed again and again. By the time silence fell, 2 bodies lay lifeless on the floor. Michael staggered back, his breath ragged, his hands drenched in blood that was not his own. Stumbling into the night, he made his way to the Walmart parking lot, where he sat in stunned stillness until the police found him. Part 4. The Investigation. When officers arrived at the small home, the scene was suffocating in its brutality. Blood pooled across the living room floor, its metallic scent hanging thick in the air. Sarah and David lay motionless, their lives violently stolen in an eruption of rage. The walls bore streaks where the struggle had unfolded, furniture overturned in desperate resistance. Detectives documented every detail: the angle of the wounds, the path of blood droplets, the discarded box cutter lying inches from Sarah's hand. It was not the work of a careful planner but of a man consumed by raw fury. Back at the station, Michael sat slumped in an interrogation room. His clothes were stiff with dried blood, his eyes vacant, as if he were adrift in a sea of disbelief at what he had done. He spoke without hesitation, his words delivered with a strange calm. "I killed them. I killed my wife and her lover." There were no excuses, no elaborate stories. Just confession. Detectives pressed for motive. Michael explained the months of suspicion, the gnawing certainty of betrayal, the final confrontation that erupted into violence. He painted himself as a broken man, cornered by humiliation and heartbreak. For investigators, the case was painfully clear. There would be no mystery, no intricate puzzle to solve. Only a tragedy born from obsession, betrayal, and rage. Part 5. The Trial. The courtroom was packed when Michael Thompson stood trial. Journalists filled the benches, their pens scratching furiously as the prosecution unveiled the grisly details of that November night. Photographs of the crime scene were projected for the jury, images so graphic that some jurors looked away, unable to face the carnage. Prosecutors described Michael as a man who chose revenge over reason, who turned suspicion into slaughter. They argued that his actions were deliberate, not spontaneous. He had carried the weapon, followed Sarah, and stormed into that house intent on destruction. The defense painted another portrait. They spoke of a husband undone by betrayal, a man whose world collapsed in an instant. They described the killing not as premeditation but as a crime of passion, a moment where anger eclipsed all rational thought. Witnesses testified about the marriage, the signs of strain, the whispers of infidelity. Friends recounted Michael's growing paranoia. Experts dissected his state of mind, debating whether he acted in cold calculation or explosive desperation. Through it all, Michael sat silently, his gaze fixed downward. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with remorse. He admitted the killings, but pleaded for mercy, insisting he had lost control in the storm of betrayal. After days of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty, 2 counts of second-degree murder. The sentence was severe, decades in prison, ensuring Michael would live out his remaining years behind steel bars and razor wire. Part 6. The Aftermath. For the Thompson children, the verdict brought no comfort. They had lost both parents in one night, their mother to violence, their father to the justice system. Their lives, once filled with stability and routine, were shattered into fragments of grief, confusion, and unanswered questions. The community wrestled with disbelief. Neighbors who had once waved to Michael during morning commutes struggled to reconcile the quiet family man with the killer who lurked beneath. At church, whispers filled the pews. How had it come to this? How had a marriage that seemed so steady descended into such devastation? In prison, Michael faded into obscurity. Letters to his children went unanswered. The man who had once been a husband and father became an inmate known only by a number, his days reduced to routine and regret. The story of Michael and Sarah Thompson lingered as a cautionary tale, a reminder of how suspicion, left unchecked, can grow into obsession, how betrayal can spark violence, and how, in the span of minutes, a family can be destroyed forever.